Measure your way to predictable profit. Coach David here with another episode of Build with a Plan. Yeah, measure your way to a predictable profit. That's fantastic. Wouldn't that be awesome for you just to be able to slip into that predictability on what your profit is? Unfortunately, most of us out there as business owners, we don't even think about the predictable profit. We don't even think about predictability at all. We just look at where we're at and how things are happening, and we just react to what's going on. In my former life, when I had my own business, I was running it, I never really thought about what the profit was. I just looked at where I am, what my sales are, and if I felt like maybe I was feeling a little bit down, I'd just take a look at my receivables, and I would see that X amount of dollars is coming in and how many bills are going out, and I kind of just guessed that, I'm doing pretty good. But that's the wrong way to look at your business. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of business owners do. Over my time here as coaching, that's what I find. When I'm talking to business owners, they don't really know what their profit is. They don't even know, what their profit margin is. So today we're going to talk about how you can start having predictable profits. Okay, so the question, first of all, is what is your weekly revenue target? What is your monthly revenue target? Do you know what your yearly revenue target market is? As I said before, most business owners have no clue what it is that they're shooting for. Now, they might hope for, last year I did X amount of dollars, so this year I'm hoping to do this. It's kind of a hope, and then there's no plan for that to happen. Okay, so how are you going to get to your yearly revenue goal or profit goal if you're not tracking what you're doing? So what we're talking about here is, predictable profit equals regular measurement on what you're doing. Some people would call these KPIs, key performance indicators. There's lots of different definitions of exactly what the KPI would be for you. And it depends. Some KPIs work for other businesses, but which one works specifically for you? You want to have a scoreboard. You want to know how you are doing. You need to measure yourself as you go. Just think of a golfer. A golfer, every hole, they take some shots. They know what the goal is for that hole. It could be a par 3 or a par 4. And then they know if they get there in 4 and it's a par 4, then they're on track. But if they get there and they've got there in 5, now they're short 1 stroke. Now, hopefully you get there in 3, and that way you're ahead of the game. So that's what we're talking about here, is creating yourself a scoreboard so that you can understand where you're going. And this can be done and should be done on a weekly basis. That way you know whether you're going to hit your profit targets for that month. All right, so I'm going to break it down a little bit here. So you need to understand what the goal is in your profit. Let's just go with yearly profit first. Right, let's take a look at that. And then you need to know what your net profit margin looks like. Right, now typically you can find that looking at your profit and loss statement. But if you don't, if you're not that keen on able to read your P&L statement, then just ask your bookkeeper or your accountant, what is your net profit margin? So basically that is what is left over after everybody's paid. All your cost of goods sold and all your hard costs, your fixed costs, all your rent, all your insurance, all your employees, all the office stuff, your insurance, internet, all of that is paid for. And at the end of the day, what you're left over with, that is what your net profit margin is. Okay, so we're not going to get into too much heavy math here, but we're going to talk do a little bit of math. Okay, so if your goal is $50,000 in profit for the year and your profit margin is 12%, so what is your revenue goal for that year to get to your $50,000 in profit? Okay, this is after everything's paid. This is money that's in your bank. All right, so let's just do the math here. So you take your 50,000, you divide that, you take 50 divided by 12 equals 4.167. And if you times that by 100,000, because for every 100,000, you have $12,000 in profit. Remember, 12%. So 12% of 100,000 is the 12,000 for every 100,000. So in order to do that, so now you have to sell $416,700 for that year at your 12% profit margin to get to your 50,000 in profit. And now let's break that down. So you take your 416,700, divide that by the 12 months. That gets you 34,725. Divide that by your 4 weeks per month, which is 8,681. I did 4 weeks. I know you could argue, say there's 21 days in a month on average. Yes, I'm just trying to make the math easy. So you take your month, you divide it by 4. That's 8,681 for the month. You divide that by 5. So now you're looking at $1,736 per day is what you need to sell on average to get to your 416,700. Divide that by the 12% will get you the 50,000 of your profit. So hopefully that wasn't too confusing, but basically you take your yearly and divide it by your month, divide it by week, divide it by daily. And that's where you get to your daily amount for attaining that 50,000 in profit. Okay, so how many sales do you need to make a day to get you your $1,736? Obviously, it's going to be different depending on who you are, what you sell, what your price point is, that type of stuff. Okay, so now you know how many sales you have to do each day to make that $1,736. So the next thing you need to understand is, what is your conversion rate? And what is that exactly? Well, how many leads? So basically you take your leads and you divide that by new customers. And that will help you understand how many more, or what's your conversion rate on your leads. So just to make it easy, let's say for every 4 leads you get, you can convert one of them. So that is 25% conversion rate. Okay. So now you know how many, or now you know what your conversion rate is. So now you know how many leads you need to be reaching out to make sure that you're hitting the amount of sales that you need to make every day, so that on average that works out to be your monthly average to get to your yearly goal of the 416,000. Okay, so once you understand that, now you know, as you're tracking during the week, you could look at what your sales are. And if it appears that you are not hitting your target, take a look at what you're doing. Are you generating the amount of leads that you need to? Are you able to convert at the rate you think that you can convert at? And if not, what can you tweak to make sure you are converting properly? Or go back a step. Do you need to do something differently to be attracting the leads to your business? Now, lead conversion and all that fun stuff, that's a whole other podcast. But today I'm just trying to talk about making sure that you have a predictable profit, and you need to do that by measuring, having that scoreboard. Again, just think of the golfer. Every hole, they know whether they're plus, minus, or on par for their goal for the end of the game. So that's what I want you to think about that. So break it down. It's best to break it down per day, because that way, if it's Wednesday or Thursday and you're not hitting your weekly goal, if you're only at half of your weekly goal and it's Thursday, then you need to make some adjustments. Does that mean that you need to call a few more customers? Does that mean that you need to up your lead generation? Whatever it is, right? But if week 1 and week 2 are on track, and then week 3 seems to be off, again, you only know it's off if you're tracking it. And that's how you can have predictable sales moving forward, or sales and profits. Because really, at the end of the day, would you not want a business that you can predict, I'm easily going to make my 50K this year? Now, of course, I'm only using 50K as a round number. I mean, I don't know what your target is or what your goal is. But if you don't know what it is, and you don't know what your profit margin is, how are you going to make sure that you're going to hit that goal? So again, this week we're talking about measuring stuff, taking a look at what your profit goal is, what your profit margin is, and do a little bit of math and figure out what you need to do every day in sales to make sure that you're going to hit your profit. Now, I know I threw a lot of numbers out there, but this was an important lesson that I didn't learn, or I didn't understand when I had my own business. If you don't know what you want to hit, and if you're not tracking it on a regular basis, that doesn't necessarily have to be, every day, but in the beginning you probably should. That way you understand what tweaks you might need to do. And once you've got those tweaks figured out, then you can be looking maybe once a week, maybe every 2 weeks, and make sure that you're on track. But believe me, if you're not keeping track, you're not able to make those tweaks, and then your profit isn't as predictable as you hope for. All right, so hopefully you have, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. I would love to hear and I would answer any questions on a potential future podcast and so on. You can reach us at yourfsmatrix.com. Reach out to me directly on any of the socials at David Pataki. Or you can reach me at david@yourfsmatrix.com. Leave a comment below. We will get back to you as soon as you can. Until next time, Coach David out.